Welcome to Monday, January 16th, 2023, your Day Weather Podcast, brought to you by Cowboy State Daily. Check them out at cowboystatedaily.com. Also brought to you by WYDOT. When there's ice and snow, take it slow. Well, long-term changes are taking place as we've been discussing. We also got a moderately sized Pacific storm that's going to be bringing snow to many of you as we get into late tomorrow and into the day on Wednesday. And longer term, the colder weather that we've been seeing is going to continue to develop slowly. We'll be focusing in on a small storm, part of the Pacific storminess, coming through Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, and parts of South Dakota, mainly late Tuesday night, but especially during the day Wednesday. It's going to be, I'd call it a moderately sized snow event for some. Nebraska, you folks are going to get a good wet snow, good in the sense, good water content with it, but it will cause some problems. Also, the Pacific West is still going to get more storms for a few more days. More rain and snow for California. The Pacific Northwest, there was a lot of rain and mountain snow. In the desert Southwest, especially Arizona, over the weekend. And there's a few more days of that before things begin to shift. And that shift is that major weather pattern change across the Northern Hemisphere that we talked about last week. It's on track to make the rest of the month in February colder, partly due to what we call a stratospheric warming event. For folks who've been watching this podcast for a while, you've probably heard me say that phrase before. For you folks fairly new to the podcast, a stratospheric warming event is something that on a very large scale can make it cold in some places. And we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the podcast, and we'll talk more about stratospheric warming events as we go through the week ahead. Today's satellite photo continues to see that flow of moisture from the Pacific continuing to move on in. We can see a flow of moisture continuing to bring rain and snow to California, into Nevada and Arizona there. And this swirl of clouds here was kind of what came through the Rockies Sunday and Sunday night and Monday, disorganized, not really doing too much. But the Pacific continues to just be a factory of storms here for a little bit longer. Here is what the weather will be like this afternoon. Here's the upper level low that you just saw swirl across the Midwest, heading towards the upper Great Lakes. This guy right here, coming into California later today and tonight, is what's going to move into Colorado as we get into tomorrow and into Wednesday. So from tomorrow through Wednesday, we're going to see what we call that lee side cyclogenesis, where you get enough jet stream energy and enough upper air low pressure, basically an upper level low, to come over the Continental Divide. And that extra spin you get from the air getting squeezed over the Rockies and the Continental Divide gets that lee side cyclogenesis going. So look what happens. You have kind of a disorganized trough in the Great Basin. But look how it gets organized. You can see the black rings here. You get 1, 2 of them, and you have a deeper low forming over east central Colorado. Now, this is not terribly a strong system, but it's got a lot of Pacific moisture with it. It's going to tap into some colder air, draw it in from the northwest, and we're going to have a decent little snow event for many areas of Colorado, southeastern Wyoming, all in Nebraska, getting into the southeastern areas of South Dakota, and some rain out ahead of it. And this is what the precipitation forecast looks like through Thursday morning. This arch right here is the heavier precipitation that's going to track along with that low that's going to be in east central Colorado here. And on the northwest side of the low, where it's going to be cold enough, is all going to be snow. So this will be the front range of Colorado, the northeast plains of Colorado, all in Nebraska, parts of southeastern Wyoming as well, lighter amounts elsewhere. And you can see, if we focus in a little bit more, you can see where the heavier moisture is going to be where you are. As we take a look at the snowfall forecast, a pretty impressive band of snow along this low as it heads out into the plain states. So this will be causing travel concerns along Interstate 80 in southeastern Wyoming, across Nebraska, and then some travel problems in the northeastern areas in the front range of Colorado as well, along and north of the Palmer Divide, up through I-70, I-76, then along I-25 and I-80. This will be coming in late Tuesday night and during the day on Wednesday. So there's going to be some travel concerns, especially in those blue and pink areas that you see there. Focusing a little bit closer, there's the potential for a pretty good snow event in Nebraska there. As you can see, that moisture is desperately needed. So that's good to see January precipitation like that. But livestock interest and travelers as we get into that late Tuesday night through Thursday morning time frame. From Sioux Falls down there to near Omaha and Lincoln, back to Scottsbluff and Sidney, up to Chadron and Alliance, over to the Front Range of Wyoming and Colorado. Be prepared for some winter weather. There you can see it in a little bit closer. Not a huge storm, but certainly one that's going to be impactful. Then the longer term. This is by Sunday. The high-pressure ridge is still forecasted to build in the eastern Pacific. The high-pressure ridge is building up into the Greenland area, North Atlantic area. This should give some folks a little deja vu. This is exactly the setup that began to form in early to mid-December that ended up leading to that very big cold outbreak that we had just before Christmas time when the Arctic air cut loose out of those northern latitudes. Not saying the Arctic air will be as extreme as what we saw in December, but we've got to watch it because the setup is similar. Remember, patterns will repeat themselves during the course of a season. What will happen once in the season sometimes happens again. We see that frequently. This is the cold air anomaly, temperature anomaly, by next Monday, a week from today. And you can see the purple and the green and the blue covering the entire west as that cold air spills in. This goes out to right at the end of January. And basically, it's the same premise. High pressure in the eastern Pacific, a big trough across the country, high pressure reaching up into Greenland and across the North Atlantic. So what happens is all the cold air gets bottled up on this side of the hemisphere. We saw this in December. Then the Pacific took over. We had all that Pacific air. We still are now. But then the Canadian air is going to take over as the Pacific air gets cut off. So it's the yin and yang, the back and forth of a winter season. And look at these temperature anomalies by the last day of January. That's cold, folks. We'll see what happens, but our confidence is fairly high. Let's say our confidence is growing in this colder regime for the end of January and into February, partly due to what we call a stratospheric warming event. We really didn't have this, and you don't have to have these events to make it cold. But when you do have them, it does tend to make the cold a little bit longer lasting. Very, very high in the atmosphere, up into the stratosphere. The stratosphere starts a little bit above 50,000 feet roughly and goes up to those higher altitudes, 100,000 feet and higher. What we're seeing here is basically right around 100,000 feet roughly. In the atmosphere, when the stratosphere warms up a little bit, the stratosphere expands. And it's like an accordion. If the atmosphere expands, it pushes the atmosphere closer to the ground. There's a lid on the top of the atmosphere as the atmosphere reaches space. So you can't push the atmosphere into space, but you can push the atmosphere down. And this is the temperature anomaly in the high stratosphere right now. But look what happens to the temperature change. And you can look at these temperatures and these colors. They represent temperature. Blue, cold, the lighter colors, the warmer temperatures. So 10 days from now, it goes from this regime to look at the change in the stratospheric temperatures over Alaska, the Northwest Territories, up to the Arctic Circle. You see that? So basically, up here, the atmosphere expands, getting closer to the ground. That expansion of the atmosphere pushing to the ground literally just pushes the very cold air that's here. It's got nowhere to go. It's either going to go over here, it's going to go this way. It's not going to go up. It's going to get pushed off the higher latitudes to the lower latitudes. This configuration here is going to want to push it to the lower latitudes towards western and central North America. So there's a lot of things on the table that support this colder trend, and will keep you informed as we go on here over the next several days. Have yourself a great Monday. See you tomorrow.